They say when you wear Black Power Media gear, you can accomplish anything. You play any and every position. From coaching, to kicking, to receiving, to running and juking. And, oh my goodness, let's see that again in slow motion. Get off me. And you're going to have a lot of haters coming at you, but what you got to do is you got to shake them off, and get to your goal and accomplish it. And when that's done, it's a beautiful thing. I'm talking about going hard, extra, for that extra point. And when it's done beautifully, you talking about touchdown. Oh, and the crowd goes wild and they're celebrating with you and everything. Man, let's see that again. Nice.
Black Power Media, baby. That's how we do it.
Now go to blackpowermedia.org and get you some of that gear. Empower yourself today. Yeah.
I mix what I like. All right, world, back again right here at Black Power Media. Again, I'm Jared Ball with my main man, Dr. Todd Steven Burroughs, for this very important edition of I Mix What I Like, and a discussion of the new documentary about the main man, Reverend Al Sharpton, Loudmouth. What's up, Dr. Burroughs? Welcome back to the program. It's good to see you again, man. What's going
Dr.
on?
Ball, 13 days into the new year, and I'm already destroying my New Year's resolution. I swore I wasn't going to do any of this kind of stuff this year, okay? Those who follow me on Twitter know that I have fallen in love, engaged, and asked to marry and married Tiny Desk, right? I'm writing about culture this year. I'm writing a novel this year. I swore the number one thing I said to myself was no more of this running your mouth and going on Black Power Media and running your mouth. And what is it? It's day 13th, and here we are. How's it going, Dr. Ball?
I'm great. I forgot about the documentary till you told me I had to watch it so we could talk about it. So I quickly watched it.
right. Yes, yes.
Let me start this because I want to hear from you. The only thing I'm going to say at the beginning is when my time comes.
Yes.
Let me not make it so selfish. I think any of us would welcome this level of recasting and propaganda of our lives at the end of our lives.
Yes.
So let us all live to see our lives retold with such style, fervor,
beautiful,
and
wonderful,
narrow focus. I mean, John Legend executive produced this thing, and shout out to John Legend who has lived up to everything I would have expected from him and produced this wonderful. Al looks great in this joint. This is if you want to see how to make a propaganda film,
absolutely,
this is as good as anything the Nazis would have done.
Absolutely,
this is as good as anything that has been done for the history of the United States. This is a remarkable documentary.
Yes.
So, go ahead, my man. Take it. I'll let you go from there, and I'll come back. But I'm very impressed. They did a really good job.
I have to look. I'm known as a hater. I won a couple of years ago the last Hater of the Year award. I'm warning the audience. Yes. I have to go beyond to a new level of hate today.
Oh man!
So I have to actually give a disclaimer. Okay, so how do disclaimers go? The views and opinions expressed here do not reflect those of Dr. Jared Ball or any of the staff of Black Power Media.
Oh, damn.
I have to go there. Now, let me say some things that your audience is not going to like. And then after I do that, I'm going to jump on Al Sharpton and this film with both feet. So, let me say this first. With the exception of some quotes from Richard Prince and some other, media institutions that have been friendly to me, I have to admit that the only reason most people have heard of me, the only reason that most people have heard of my articles or seen my articles, The only reason that I can go somewhere in the Africana world or whatever, and my voice is recognized, is because of Dr. Jared Ball. And I would like to thank him, because after I say the things I'm going to say, that situation is going to stay the same.
Oh, damn.
Now, so before I call Al Sharpton the Black American equivalent of the CIA dictator that they put up after they assassinated an African leader.
Oh, wow.
Before I do that, let me say something that y'all not going to like. Now, if you're one of those people that don't like to hear the black left being attacked, I want you to hit mute right now. And after I finish saying what I'm going to say, I'm going to wave my hand like this.
So it's a trigger warning? Is that what?
Yeah, it's a trigger warning. I'm going to wave my hand like this, and that means you can come back. Okay? All right. So we're starting now. Spoiler, we're starting now. This is our fault. This is our fault because the black left is so obsessed with attacking the United States that they don't even understand how organized people in the United States. So I'm going to be honest, I'm going to name names. So when I go to Black Agenda Report and I read another badly written, no interviews, barely any sort of historical analysis, rambling, ranting that half of that site does, and I'm a former contributor to Black Agenda Report. Some of my best articles are on Black Agenda Report. But when I read one of these no thought, just parroting whatever analysis that they do, I shake my head and I realize that's why y'all can't organize nobody. That's why nobody ever comes to your thing. I agree with Sharpton when he makes fun of people like y'all. And I'm going to say this. And I mean this not only for the left, not only for Black is Back Coalition or all of that. I'm even saying this for people on this channel. If you are so fixated in defending Russia and you don't want to talk about the Wagner Group and what the Wagner Group is doing in Russia, that's why you can't organize anybody. Folks like you have left open the space for Sharpton to come in and organize people. And yes, if you think I'm talking about you, I'm talking about you. I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm talking about you. And I may like you. It's not that I don't like you. Like I said, some of my best articles on Black Agenda Report. Some of the people I really like on this channel do amazing work. But I have to make that critique because this Tony Martin bullshit analysis. That's right. I'm talking about Tony Martin too. What's the first rule of hate, Dr. Ball? Say the first rule of hate.
Everyone can get it.
I'm talking about Tony Martin too. This Tony Martin bullshit intellectual analysis where if you like somebody, you can't hold a dialectic in your damn hand is why you can't organize nobody.
Wait a minute.
No.
You're not talking about Tony Brown's journal, right? You're talking about Tony Martin,
Tony Martin, the Garvey scholar who can't say anything negative about Garvey. That's right. I'm talking about.
Oh, I see what you're saying. I see.
Okay. This Tony Martin bullshit thing where if you like somebody and you like their politics, you can't say anything negative about them. You can't give a reasoned analysis. That's why we can't organize anybody. See, I believe in the dialectic. I believe, for instance, just for example, I believe that you can say Marcus Garvey was one of the greatest Africans on the planet and still say that he called himself president of a continent he had never stepped on. I guess you can say at the same time, our brains are intelligent enough to say at the same time that Marcus Garvey was the greatest African on the planet, and still Hubert Henry Harrison's analysis of him was correct. Can we agree, Dr. Ball, that you can do those two things at the same time? Can we agree with that?
I mean, well, obviously, yes, on that. And I want to let you finish. I just don't know. Go ahead and finish. I agree on that point, on that specific point. I'm not sure I'm with you entirely on this approach.
We need complexity. And complexity is not just having a rapid response just because we think the United States is a country that Frederick Douglass said, right, that is worse than savages, right? We can say that and still say, but we can analyze the United States, right? I've spent 6 months doing Africa briefs for a website where I've been trying to find a country in Africa I could live in and not be attacked as a journalist. I can't find one. Not even Ghana. So I can love Africa and want Pan-Africanism and still say, well, we've got some freedom of speech issues. We've got some freedom of assembly issues to work on, right? I can hold two opposing thoughts in my head. I think that we have to stop this knee-jerk thing. And I love Kwame Ture. I mean, I introduced Kwame Ture when he spoke at Seton Hall in 1989. But this whole thing of, if the United States is for them, I'm against them. And if they're against the United States, I'm for them, frankly, is not a sophisticated analysis. And I think that now we're approaching in the middle of the 21st century, we can grow up enough intellectually and say that we can oppose many things about the United States and maybe even the concept of the United States based on its history and based on how it was put together, and still say, but the United States got some things right about human rights that we need to look at, that human rights is not a Eurocentric concept. There are many people in Iran, in the Middle East, who would like some First Amendment right now. So I just want to say that because I think this knee-jerk analysis so many people do does not help anybody. I understand the Soviet Union helped African liberation struggles, and I respect that. The Soviet Union. But that doesn't mean that I'm going to knee-jerk defend Russia. So I mean, we gotta do these we gotta show some complexity, and that's why I wanted to talk to you this morning about Sharpton, because I want to do a complex discussion of this film to get to the provocative point that I made in the beginning about him. So now I'm gonna wave my hands. People can come back. Those who want to come back.
So. And I don't want to belabor the point because I want us to get to the documentary, but I do think you've been unfair.
Go ahead.
To the left, to Black Agenda Report and others and else, et cetera. So it's not that. So for instance, on some things, I think it's great. Yes, the journalism could maybe be improved here or there. They could get interviews, they could do more work, et cetera, and so forth. But okay. And certainly not everything that everybody does is here or there or elsewhere is perfect.
Right.
But I think you've not afforded the nuance that you say you want to those spaces. So I don't agree with you. I haven't read everything Black Agenda Report publishes, but But their defense of Russia is not a blind defense of Russia. It's a critique of the US's claim that Russia is the boogeyman so that the US can do its version of imperialism under the guise of supporting a freedom struggle in Ukraine and elsewhere. So it's not a blind defense of Putin. It's not being ignorant of the Wagner Group or supporting all of that. It's simply saying the US attempt, the dominant narrative to demonize Putin to justify their intervention is false and doesn't help us. So that's one thing. So I think you're being unfair there. The other thing I think you're being unfair on, for instance, is that yes, I like the starting point of saying the job is for us as activists, organizers, wannabe revolutionaries to create the revolution, to make people like Sharpton moot.
Sure.
But I don't think it's fair to say that he's able to do what he's doing because the left is insufficient. So, for instance, yes, we should be more organized. Yes, but we have to also consider what's happened. So, for instance, even at the level of the inadequacy of the journalism, as you point out,
right?
People who contribute to bar, as you well know, are not funded. There's no money. There's no staff. There's no editors. There's no, So Sharpton has always been close to an apparatus, whether it's the church, whether it's mainstream media, whether it's the Democratic Party, whether it's the FBI, whether it's where resources are available.
Right.
He's also never challenged at an analytical level or a political level the core politics and ideologies of the West and the United States. So he's not ever positioned himself. So and I'll have more to say about him as we get into the documentaries. But I just want to say, I get you. I get the frustration. I like putting the onus back on us to a certain extent, but I don't think you're being fair there on that point.
I accept what you're saying. I accept what you're saying. Even while I remind you that nobody got paid for Du Bois's crisis and nobody got paid for Freedom Waves. But I see what you're saying. So let's start.
But to your point, though, would you say? But wait, though, would you say though? And I can't think of the equivalent at the time. But at the time, Freedom Waves was doing its thing.
Right.
There was a commercially and algorithmically of the day funded and supported narrative from a commercial a press, a conservative press, black, white, and others that was speaking against them, that was more well-funded and propped up and got more attention than Freedom Waves or the Crisis and all of that. That's my point. That would be my point.
And anyway, you are right. And you are right. And you are right. All right. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. So, Sharpton.
With that said, let's go. Yeah, I got my notes ready. Whenever you're ready, go ahead.
How do we get to this provocative statement that I said about him being the Black American equivalent of the African dictator that the CIA props up? Right. Okay. Well, first of all, let me talk about why I got so upset at this and my quote unquote expertise about this. Right. Dr. Ball knows, and this audience now knows, that I'm like the biggest nerd on the planet. Like I am the, repressed Poindexter, and Poindexter comes from a name of a character in the Felix the Cat cartoons of the early 60s. See how I know that? Okay. I've been to a club maybe one time. I've never been to a strip club. I've never even been to Hooters.
Do you all remember? Do you remember I tried get you to go to a strip club?
You did.
Okay.
You did. I do.
Once upon a time.
I'm just corny, right? I'm just corny, right?
It just doesn't sound right.
So it doesn't. No, I agree it doesn't, because I'm heterosexual. I did, but it doesn't. I'm corny, right? But let me explain to you why I got so upset about this particular documentary. The documentary covers basically everything I remember from my senior year of high school, all the way through to college, all the way through when I got a job. And I remember reluctantly leaving all of it to go to this place called Maryland because I wanted to be a Black press historian. So I remember this period very well because I was not only following all of this stuff while in college. There were whole days where I would turn on WLIB and it would be so popping, I'd skip college for that day. I would pretend, my mom would come home and I would pretend I had come home from Seton Hall. And I hadn't done anything but sit and listen to the radio all day. So I remember this era. I'm not a scholarly expert in this era, but as an observer, there's a lot of things I remember about this era that many people have forgotten, including journalists who are around that area. So the Sharpton documentary, I think, first of all, does a good organic media critique. Now, what purposes that critique serves, I know is something that Dr. Ball and I can talk about as media scholars, right? But one thing Sharpton does get right is that he points out that the whiteness of the media is directly proportioned to how hated he and the other black activists were. Because as he says, if the media had done right, had done the correct analysis, or if the media had allowed our analysis to come through, they would eventually be not only blamed, but then they would have to be answerable and accountable, which they were not. I remember this area. There was a white media, and then there was a black media. And the black media was this great radio station called WLIB. That was a news talk station during the day. And Bob Law, who's in there, and incorrectly he's labeled WLIB, but he was WWRL. He was the other black station. These were black-owned stations. And he had a show called Night Talk that aired from midnight to 5 in the morning on the National Black Network. So we had this amazing black media, well-prepared, very intelligent folks who were interviewing, doing analysis, and it was happening in this alternative media eco-universe. In addition to the Amsterdam News, we had this amazing investigative reporting paper called The City Sun that took the harshest black nationalist positions that you could take. You'll see in the documentary, there's a couple of crowds, and this woman is holding up a newspaper, and the newspaper said, "It's war." That was the City Sun. Because the City Sun was like, yeah, we're at war with cowardly black politicians and with white supremacists. And what I remembered about this era was that, to go to my little notes, because I had to write notes about this. First, I missed the harshness of public statements on both sides. I miss people sounding like this.
Even Sharpton sounded gangster at some point.
This is when Sharpton was a nationalist. See, this is Sharpton I remember, right? This is the exact Sharpton I remember. And when I covered, actually, we'll get to that in a moment. Because you couldn't be a black journalist in the late 80s and 90s in the New York area and not cover Al Sharpton. You just couldn't. But let's talk about this gap that Sharpton fills, right? First of all, with the exception of Reverend Daughtry and some others, there's no real strong black leaders, and Benjamin Chavis, by the way, who you see in the documentary, that there's no real, black leaders in openly racist New York City in the 80s, because in the 80s, everybody was talking about becoming an elected official and getting in the system, but people being in the system were not protecting black people. So, David Dinkins and the black police director and all these people were not protecting black people. And there was no confrontation when there was open white racism, right? Because why? Everybody was focused on Bill Cosby and Vanessa Williams as Miss America and, Philip Michael Thomas on Miami Vice and all of that, right? So you have 8 years of Reagan nationally and Koch, a white racist who's mayor of New York locally, right? So what else do you have? You have this is the decade in which Jesse Jackson joins the Democratic Party, right? Some say he sells out in 88, right? Minister Farrakhan is selling soap. Oh, I'm sorry. I mean, Minister Farrakhan is doing his power, right? That's right. I'm sorry. The power, remember P.O. Remember power? Okay. He's selling soap. Okay. I'm sorry. What's the first rule of hate? Everybody gets it.
Everybody can get it.
All right. So where's the people? And he fades after Jesse's sellout. He does this great speech at the Alternative Convention '88, because people forget, while Jesse Jackson was compromising, Farrakhan was at the Alternative Convention in '88, where he does this amazing speech where he talks about how black people are like the retriever, right? Who is loyal to his master, right? The retriever's hungry. The master shoots the bird, the retriever goes and gets it, and instead of eating the bird and running away, the retriever comes back to the master and puts the bird, right? That's Farrakhan in '88, right? And then after that, they fade out, right? Young people like me, because I'm like 19, 20, and my late teens, early 20s, I'm looking for leadership, and maybe this was just me. I'm looking for leadership from entertainers. Spike Lee comes out, says, I'm a black nationalist with a movie camera. I believe him. I mean, I'm naive and gullible by nature, but I mean, I'm young, so I'm extra naive and gullible. So when Public Enemy comes out and says, our goal is to build 5,000 black leaders by the end of our recording contract, I believe him too. I believe everybody. Okay, Dr. Ball, I'm sure you relate to me a little bit on this, right?
I quote you all the time. This was the time we thought we were going to win. I believed it. I get it. I thought we were on our way to victory.
So then you get this tabloid media culture that Sharpton talks about. And he talks about, because I remember all those people that interviewed him. I knew their names. Like, I remembered all those people. And notice the whole point of the film. And by the way, Dr. Boy, I'm assuming you agree with me that this shows how little difference between a sympathetic documentary and an authorized documentary is. This is not an authorized documentary. This is a sympathetic documentary.
Please, first of all, it's obviously authorized because they have private jet footage of Sharpton interviews with clearly originally produced footage of Sharpton on his private jet. So, how else would it be that if it wasn't authorized? And it's a John Legend piece. I'll come back to that, but it's that more than anything for me gives it away. You can see it right. Wait, on this side right here, John Legend, executive producer. So I mean, and that said it all. And the music is beautiful. It's beautiful. The score for it is beautiful. It sounds great.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. So Sharpton admits he knows how he's playing this game, right? So he's on the Richard Bay show. Nobody even remembers this guy, Richard Bay. I do. He's on Morton Downey Jr. show. I remember when he got into a fist fight with Roy Ennis on the Morton Downey Jr. show.
Absolutely.
One of the most disgraceful acts that I've ever seen on television then and now, right? But Sharpton's playing this game. And
but that wasn't in here.
No, but it's, where it is, though? It's in the Morton Downey Jr. documentary, though. If you see the Morton Downey Jr.
It's not in this one, though.
It's not in this one. That's right.
The point I'm trying.
That's right. And that's right, Dr. Boyle. You keep making that point. Because if you go to the Morton Downey Jr. documentary, I forget whether it was on MSNBC or CNN, they talk about the relationship that they had with Sharpton. And Sharpton knew what he was doing, being on that national show, right? But let's keep going. So what else? I talked about, you got the real black media, back when black media was real, right? Okay, and not this phony corporate, funding thing that we have now, right? And let's also remember that there's no internet, there's no Joy Ann Reid, there's no MSNBC. I mean, Joy Reid was probably in high school or in Harvard at this time, right? And this was such, we say media is hegemonic now. This was a period of time in which you could watch a debate on mainstream media about apartheid, and there were two sides. What were the two sides? The one side was, well, these black people are being oppressed. The other side was, well, they're anti-Soviet Union. So the United States, we can't go against them because they're our allies against the Soviet Union. This is how things were debated. And all of the people that Dr. Ball and I critiqued, Michael Eric Dyson, Cornel West, all these folks were not there at that time. They were being developed. They weren't, if I may, Dr. Ball, they weren't chosen yet, if I may.
They were getting their resumes together, though.
They were getting their resumes together. So this was a very different period than we have now. So again, to go into this idea, okay, how did Sharpton fill this gap? Well, I'm going to be honest, and Dr. Ball, please debate me if you feel I'm wrong. Whatever we want to say about Sharpton, he was willing to take heat that nobody else was willing to take because of his direct confrontation with these folks.
So let me stop you here to
Yeah,
raise
go
one of
ahead.
the points that because I
Go
wrote
ahead.
here because, and I feel like I'm being manipulated because of the high quality of the production of the documentary. It does encourage you to raise a question that I wrote here. Does he deserve credit for popularizing the anti-blackness of this country? And to your point, confronting, now I want to resist the encouragement of the documentary by saying he doesn't deserve credit for it because he was making a conscious choice to popularize his own entrance into this struggle, to as he says in the documentary, basically to claim that he is advancing us beyond what King and Malcolm X had done. He said that he says something to the effect that unlike them, I'm able to promote our causes in ways that they weren't even able to. So it's like, so on some level, he was consciously making an attempt. The whole presentation to James Brown, the whole adoption of James Brown's hair, the whole adoption of James Brown, who was a Nixonian black capitalist, and using that to rebrand himself as the heir of Malcolm and King, the advancement. So as I wrote, that he was what we're seeing in this documentary are the origins of the modern day cottage industry around race leadership. But the documentary clearly is trying to make us feel like he deserves credit for being willing to stand tall and do what King and others had done, even if it's absent the analysis, absent the critique, absent the ultimate goal. He does not have the goal that King and Malcolm had. But so anyway, I say all that to say, does he deserve credit for it? And I know the film wants us to say yes.
And see, audience, that's the kind of sophisticated analysis that is not in this film. Am I correct, Dr. Wall?
Oh, absolutely. There's no, I mean, yeah, I just didn't want to keep going. I got more, but there's
no,
much.
you should keep. You should keep going. You should keep going.
That's the point, though. The point is, that's the main thing I'm taking from this film. This is, if you want to understand Patrisse Cullors, if you want to understand Tamika Mallory, and better yet, if you want to be them, this is the history. This is the blueprint. Because all he says in there, he even says, he looks defiantly into the camera as in his current old man self and says, people accuse me of just wanting media attention, but this is what I do. And
he said, media attention is my goal.
Yeah, but he says, but this is what I do.
But he says, media attention is my goal. And this is where, again, I think we have to do some self-reflection. And maybe Black Lives Matter, you know, people like Crystal Strong and these other people are doing these things that I'm about to say. So I'm not painting everybody with a broad brush, but I am making
the Crystal Strongs and the April Goggins and them are not in the. That's the different. But they're not in the Sharpton category. That's what I'm saying.
But see that's what I'm saying too. I think that Sharpton at his best shows what happens with this confrontation. He fills this gap because there's no confrontation. So he goes and does the confrontation. And I agree, there's a good version of that and there's a bad version of that. And Sharpton's been both, right? Sometimes simultaneously, right? Go ahead. No, you want to say something? Go ahead.
So let me just show you something I got from Dr. Orasami Burton today. And next week, I believe he and Daruba are going to be joining us to talk more about this. But he heard we were going to do this and sent me something that speaks more to the point that I'm trying to get. So when you bring up this issue of confrontation, this is really what I'm thinking of. It's not that he wants to redefine what confrontation means.
Yeah.
So this is a letter. This is a letter to the City Sun, to your point, April 25th to May 1st edition of 1990, written by Daruba bin Wahad in response to having heard what someone was saying critical of Daruba in his previous critique of Al Sharpton.
Right.
So just from the beginning here, the anonymous letter to the City Sun last week regarding my statements on WLIB about Al Sharpton brings to mind the techniques employed by the FBI's counterintelligence program to destroy the credibility of principled Black leadership while promoting the public image of those in our community who are opportunistic or paid informants. So said differently by me, I would be saying that overall, the film, this documentary wants us to accept that Sharpton's version of confrontation is the only acceptable version of Black confrontation that we should engage in. That is arranged marches that at most call for saying they're racist, you're racist, but don't offer any analysis about capital, about imperialism, don't offer anything up about guerrilla warfare or other forms of armed struggle or other forms of more militant, even Dr. King's nonviolent direct action.
Interesting.
Like, so Sharpton, of the many things the film does not say, as Sharpton looks to position himself as the modern day king, is what King himself was advocating. The redistribution of landlords' rents back to the people, the permanent encampments of settlements to block the permanent movement of the state, not just calling people racist, but attaching the white supremacy of individuals in New York or Chicago or elsewhere to the imperialism of the United States and the colonization of people abroad and internally. That's what King was doing. So you could say I'm more popular, but that's because you're more popular because you're more acceptable. You're more, imagine Dr. King or Malcolm X in a fist fight or Morton Downey or, rolling around on the floor with Roy. Of course that would have never happened because they would have been too busy expertly breaking down what the hell is actually going on.
Yes.
So that's the way, that's the vision. So just quickly, and just to point out here, Dhoruba also points out that Al Sharpton admitted to being an FBI informant, which this documentary carefully
they don't say it.
No, but they offer a preemptive critique of defense. Remember, there's a part of the documentary where he talks about remember how when they wanted to get rid of Dr. King, they created false claims against him. They made him defend himself against charges of this and that. So of course he's not going to mention I was accused of it. So whenever people like me or you come and say, or Dhoruba say he was an FBI for, oh no, we saw the Amazon documentary. We're already prepared for that. You're just hating on the brother because he's doing the righteous work of the Lord. And and then the last part that Dhoruba points out in this thing is that Al Sharpton has never, as Dhoruba says, Al Sharpton is great in defending the living and the free, but he never talks about political prisoners or the assassinated revolutionaries of the past. Like he's not talking about that. So it's enough. Just to the point I'm making, this is what we're encouraged to today. Don't talk about political prisoners. Don't talk about imperialism. Just make some noise about the specific and narrow racist behavior of a narrow, limited amount of white people in your immediate vicinity. Because again, Sharpton's not even saying it's the whole system, because we can go to the Democrats, we can go to Chuck Schumer, who we see him talking to and getting phone calls from, and we can go on MSNBC as we see him doing and all this other stuff. I'm like, yo, this documentary is brilliant propaganda, and all of us could only hope that we get something for us in this quality at the end of our lives.
But what does he systematically attack though? He does systematically attack one thing. Let's deal with the irony of that. He systematically attacked the media that he is now a part of, that he now has joined, right? And let's not remember how.
But then, Todd.
Yeah, go ahead.
Not today. His media critique was then. He's saying in the documentary, look at what I had to struggle against.
Go ahead.
You all don't have that problem today, because look at where I'm at. So he's very clear. He couches that critique 30 years ago to again create this narrative of he was our champion. He's been doing this for so long, and if you want to do it today, this is the model, and know that you're doing it because he paved the way for you.
Cue Velvet Jones, right? Cue Eddie Murphy's Velvet Jones, right? Remember Velvet Jones?
Yes, all of that.
Okay,
absolutely.
So no, and I want to agree with you. Not only do I want to agree with you, I want to go to the core of what the whole thing is about, because the whole thing is about is, yes, I had to make some adjustments, but I had to do what I had to do to be heard, and once I was heard by those in power, the Lord rewarded me by being the person they selected.
And you're welcome.
Now, why do I say that so succinctly? Is because I'm intelligent? No. It's because for the past 2 months, I've been watching his Saturday rallies, and that's what he says every single Saturday morning. He finds a new way to say that every Saturday morning. So he's saying, the Lord saved me, and because of that, that's why I can walk through the fire and not get burnt. Now, from a religious point of view, we could argue that. That's an interesting spiritual argument. I'm not against that argument at all. But again, when we start looking at these facts, facts are interesting things. And see, one of the reasons that I wanted to come on here was that, see, Mike Taibbi, his nemesis on WCBS TV, Matt Taibbi's father, Mike Taibbi, who was exposing him on TV, who was going up to him at rallies going, well, I found out this information, so either the U.S. attorney is lying or you are, and putting out the mic. Yeah, man, see, I remember this. And let's not forget how Les Payne found out, went up and did some investigative reporting. Les Payne, the top black investigative reporter. Yes, Nabi, that's exactly what it is. And by the way, it's at the House of Justice. That's what his place is called. He originally called it the Hall of Justice, but I think somebody, tagged him and said, no, you can't name your thing after the Super Friends, So
I was about to say,
no, because I remember, because
DC Comics gonna come get you, Al.
I originally I was there, but
I was a comic book character.
I was at the founding opening of Nan. I was at the Apollo Theater where he announced he was going to do Nan. Look, I've been there. So that's what I'm saying. I'm not an expert, but I've been an observer. Okay. So what I'm saying is that the whole philosophy of this thing is, because I was not popular, because I did things and didn't worry about whether people liked me or not, I was able to be heard. And once I was heard, then I was rewarded by God, and all of these things happened to me, and my enemies became my footstools. That's the whole argument of this thing. So yeah,
let me ask you about this too, because this is another thing I noticed too, and I know you know this history very well, because they get into the Tawana Brawley case and all of these other things. But what you don't get in the documentary, there's, correct me if I'm wrong here, there's no reference to Ferguson. They skip Ferguson. They go from his past to like 2020.
Right.
When they're talking about all the families he's helped, there's no mention of Tamir Rice or his mother Samira Rice.
Right.
And there's no post Tawana Brawley inclusion or reference to Alton Maddox. And I'm saying these three in conjunction because, again, it's painting this picture of Sharpton that ignores all of the criticism, that ignores all of the so when my point about when he and Jesse and them showed up in Ferguson, the people were like, get out of here. The chants for the crowd were like, you're not wanted here. Tamir Rice's mother, correct me if I'm wrong, has been very critical of the Sharpton machinery. All right. And all of the ancillaries that emanate from the Sharpton tree. And then I know specifically, you know this history very well. Alton Maddox, who was depicted in this documentary as working with Sharpton, they even have him on there praising Sharpton. Y'all don't know what Sharpton does off the scene for the people. Y'all don't know what this man, he does more for, they have all of that. But there's a good 20 or 30 year period after that where Maddox was explicit on lecture tapes I used to listen to that said the case, he used to argue at one point that the case was destroyed because Sharpton sold them out. So I'm not saying Maddox was right. I'm simply saying the documentary clearly, especially if you don't know any of this history, the documentary is I'm saying again, is brilliant propaganda, and all of us, any of us, would deserve something of this quality told of our life. Now, I did ask myself this, and I'll stop here. If someone did try to make something about me in this way, right. Would I have the principle to stand up and say, this is a great documentary about me, but this is some bullshit. Like, I'm not this good. Would I don't know, because this is a very well done documentary. and you put that music under me and catch me in my best clips and find the people that hate me now who used to say some shit nice about me. I mean, would I? I don't know. I would like to think so, but we all deserve it because this joint is. So anyway, what do you think about any of what I said there about what they left out in terms of Sharpton's life?
I think this is why you are an award-winning, fellowship-winning intellect, because you, as usual, have great clarity, and you're not afraid to say the truth. I'll show you the level of slickness. He says that he was converted to his National Action Network persona, and I'm being kind, by Coretta Scott King. Okay, maybe they did have the discussions he said, maybe they did. But you know, if you go to one of his books, that's not what happened. What happened was Cornel West came to him in the hospital room and said, "You're in the wrong tradition. You're trying to be in the Malcolm tradition, you're trying to be in the Garvey tradition, but you're in the King tradition. And you need to accept that." Now, where am I getting that from? I'm getting that from one of Sharpton's own books, because that just happened to be the page I read, right? Because I remember the change. The change was very dramatic. I remember that. But see, that's not sexy enough to say that Cornel West converted you. What's sexy is that you say, not only that you say Coretta Scott King converted you, but check the nuance, Dr. Ball, check the detail. He said, "I was surprised that Coretta Scott King knew all the things about me that she knew."
Wow. Right.
Now I'm gonna make some final points on my little piece of paper, and then we can continue to talk. But this already is twice the conversation, twice the level of detail that's in the film. I just want to say that. So, like I said, I said that Les Payne exposed him, and I put that article in the chat, or at least an article about the article that Les Payne did, exposing the whole Tawana Brawley thing. And there's a whole book that Matt Taibbi wrote with his black female producer at WCBS that exposed him. Both these things.
Mike Taibbi, the father, not Matt.
Thank you. Yeah. I'm sorry, Mike Taibbi, right? And all this stuff is forgotten because, you know, literary culture, nobody remembers these things. So, like, the whole thing is that Sharpton has outlived and out-hustled all people in media, including black media, to where now, where there's no black-owned radio in New York City, he is now black radio. He's now the media. He's now radio and television. And he's been drafted by his former critics to represent America, used by whites to show that they are serious, right? And who learned this lesson? The public intellectuals, Tavis, and now Joy Reid.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Because remember, he says that there was an exclusion of black thought. Well, now there's not an exclusion of black thought because whites now know they need it. Who taught them that? Sharpton.
And he taught them the version of it that they should promote. That's so, yeah, absolutely.
And so this informant thing is important because it's a fact that he was an informant for the mob. It's more of an allegation that he was going to set up Asada up, but I'll let Dhoruba talk about that. He's the expert on that. But I just want to say this.
The film does not talk about this, by the way. I mean,
not at all.
Other than that preemptive, broad defense of claims against him, they don't get into any of this.
Not at all. But there's a reason that Gil Noble banned him from Like It Is.
First of all, wait, real quick, say a word or two about who Gil Noble was and the importance of Like It Is, and then explain this banning, please.
And this banning was not official. This was something I picked up when I, was starting to talk as a college activist. When I was talking to, people in the movement or whatever, I learned about this, right? Gil Noble was a broadcaster. He had something that is now quaint called a Black Public Affairs Show, right? Which was back before we had YouTube and Black Power Media and all these things. Black people had a very small amount of control over local and national television. And as a result of the insurrections, the rebellions of the late 1960s, one of the compromises that white people in media made, as was, when the Kerner Commission came out and embarrassed them in saying that the media report from the perspective of a white man's world, the ills of the ghetto and the people who are there are never discussed. One of the concessions that whites made was they allowed these little half-hour or 1-hour programs to air locally and nationally that were hosted by blacks and with some fighting produced by blacks called Black Public Affairs shows. Now, these shows happened all across the country, and there was a national show. There were two national shows. One was called Soul, which you can see on Amazon if you have Amazon Prime. It was kind of like a black radical soul train. And there's an excellent documentary on soul called Mr. Soul that was done by the host and producer's niece that you should check out. And then there was this show called Black Journal. And Black Journal, when Tony Brown took it over, became Tony Brown's Journal. That was the national shows. But then there were these local shows. Now, when I was growing up, when all of this was happening, there were 5 local and national shows broadcasting in New York. It was one of the reasons why I almost didn't come to Maryland. I was like, I want to be a historian, but I'm going to leave behind all my favorite television shows, right?
And come down here to this wasteland.
Exactly. Oh my God. And when I first heard Kathy Hughes, I started to cry, right? On the radio. She was on the radio then. She was on the radio then.
Yeah, I know.
That's how old I was. Remember? And that's when she had that studio where you could see her from the outside, where you could look in and say, you know what I'm talking about. So
I do, yeah.
Right. So the best show, arguably the best show of all of the ones in New York was this show called Like It Is, hosted by Gil Noble. And Gil Noble considered himself a devotee of Malcolm X. And so he did interviews, he did documentaries. Paul Lee, who we know is a major Malcolm X scholar. Paul Lee worked for Gil Noble as a young man when he had a film crew. Because Gil Noble had his own film crew, and they did these documentaries. And they were all done from an African-centered perspective. He did documentaries on Malcolm X and the Civil Rights Movement. You see many of these things on YouTube right now. A lot of them have been edited because the people who put them up didn't like certain parts, and so they put certain parts up and not others. But Gil Noble, because he was at WABC TV, the New York affiliate and the flagship of the network, had access to the entire network library, film library. So he used that film library to create all these documentaries. So he's a major guy, right? Major guy. And I mean, people used to run back home from church to watch the show. Parents used to make their kids watch the show. I mean, this is how serious this show was. And so when I say that he banned Al Sharpton, that was a very serious thing. Because that means he was close to the activists, so he learned from the activists, no, this guy's an informer. He's FBI. And Gil Noble was like, nope. Because see, Gil Noble was bold enough to go to Cuba and interview Asada. And you can see that. You can see that on YouTube. There's a whole show he did where he interviewed Asada from Cuba.
But one of the important points that you're making here is that there are no clips of Gil Noble interviews with Al Sharpton in this documentary. So all the clips you get of Al Sharpton in the documentary, correct me if I'm wrong, are from either church activist speeches or his appearances on white media.
And his appearances on WLIB.
WLIB, that's right.
And there's some black show that he was on.
Though.
Yeah, and there was some black show he was on in the beginning with the female host who was calling him in the tradition of Malcolm X and all that. I don't know what that show was, but that show too, right?
But it wasn't Gil Noble is the point.
No.
And you would think that anybody active in New York in that era, Gil, to your point, even to getting to Asada, I mean, he had everybody on that show.
Right.
Everybody was on that show, like regularly. Right. So, like, yeah. Anyway,
right. So for him not having Gil Noble on, not having a Sharpton on, that shows you what's going on. Now, can I tell you something ironic about that?
Yep.
When Gil Noble died, WABC refused to do that type of show that same way. Because Gary Bird, a very famous black radio host, who did the kind of same work that Gil Noble did, but he did it on the radio. He was lobbying to get that job and to continue like it is. And the small group of black activists who are still alive, I mean, these are the same activists from the 60s, they're doing this small protest outside of WABC TV, while April Silver gives the WABC executives a huge file, a file that you could choke on Gary Bird to them to say, look, this is the person you should have. And WABC said, we're very impressed with this, but we're going to go our own way, right? And so somebody internally from WABC TV, Sandra Bookman, they created an hour show for her called Here and Now. See, get it? No more like it is, Here and Now. By the way, I make this point in a Black Agenda Report article that I did on Gil Noble and Like It Is. So again, some of my favorite articles are on Black Agenda Report. I just want to say that. That's one of my favorite articles. But here's the thing. And by the way, Herb Boyd, who's known as the most polite and loving man ever, I heard him say in a public forum, if you take the words here and now and you move around the letters, it spells nowhere.
Wow.
That's Herb Boyd saying that. That's some of the best hate. That's some of the best hate I've ever heard. Right?
There's no Alambe Brath. There's no Gary Bird in the documentary either, by the way.
Nope.
So that's sort of the point I'm getting at. The documentary is, to me, such a clear statement.
It's great.
The only legit activism
that
has ever occurred in the United States, maybe anywhere, is Al Sharpton. That's the only whether Sharpton is saying it or alluding to it himself, or it's just sort of framed this way generally throughout the documentary.
Right.
It is very clear. No one from Garvey to Malcolm to Martin to Asada or to anyone you have not heard of yet, has done the thing the way it should be done, like this guy.
Yep.
That's what it's saying. And that's why, so years ago, I was in a faculty meeting and without thought or preparation, somebody said, we were talking about who should we invite to convocation, and somebody said maybe we should get John Legend. And they said something specifically. They wanted somebody who could talk about activism, and they said maybe we could get John Legend. And just as a visceral response, I was like, why?
Right.
And they were like, because he does all this activist stuff. And I was like, what are you talking about? I mean, he's like I said, he's a talented musician who at times shows up at certain very liberal events. But if we're talking about activists, the list, it's not that he would, what list, how long would a list have to be for him to be on it is my question. It's like how I would, what? But my point was then so what I was trying to say, and we ended up having like a side debate. The point I was trying to make then is John Legend represents and is being used to represent the acceptable version and framing for what activism means. And then so when I saw his name on this documentary, I said, wow, that is really, by the way, just to not leave it all on him, a quick search here in terms of who put this thing together. The director and the writer of this thing, Josh Alexander, this is Josh Alexander. How do I get rid of this? This is Josh Alexander, who's best known for My Best Friend's Girl, Backseat, and Southern Rights, none of which I know anything about.
Neither do I.
But I don't get the sense that he is, maybe perfectly situated to tell this history and this story. Maybe not. But maybe with the oversight of the executive production of John Legend, maybe the idea was that this would be he would be the perfect writer director. And I will say again, stylistically,
it's wonderful.
It is very well done.
Wonderful.
I mean, the audio sounds great. The visuals look great. It moves back and forth well. When they go back and forth to the Tawana Brawley case and this, that, and third, I think they all, when they have Sharpton dramatically read all the names of the dead that he's supported, again, no Tamir Rice. It's very dramatic. I mean, everything looks and sounds great. It's very easy to watch.
Right. It's not a full list, by the way, because when things fell apart, like when I covered Sharpton, he was trying to do something for a police shooting in Jersey City with a Latino guy, Maximino Cintron, and it didn't work out. Like he promised me a rally. Like I literally went up to him saying, "So are you rallying tomorrow?" And he looked at me and said, "I'm rallying tomorrow." He didn't rally that next day, right? So when these things fall apart, I think those names have been edited out of the list. So these are the names of the people that were all the way through that he followed through with all the way for whatever reason. I want to say this other thing about how wonderful this documentary is. You and I know, Dr. Ball, but maybe the audience doesn't know. They spend a lot of money on this documentary.
Oh, easily.
Because I don't know if you know this audience. To use 1 minute of this kind of network film and these TV clips and all this costs between $1,000 and $3,000 a minute.
Wow.
So they spent a lot of money on these clips.
Wow. Okay.
That shows you how much money they had. So in addition to the production value, you had, and these researchers, clearly they had wonderful researchers as well. You had money for all of these amazing clips. There are more clips in this documentary than I've seen in many, in really any two on our experience. So that shows you the kind of backing it had. And that's not surprising, because just to finish my little notes, and then we can talk about, what other topics you want on this, Dr. Ball. Just to finish my little notes, I mean, notice how, of course, Obama's cued right near the end, right? Obama comes in right on cue, right? Come on in and legitimize him and say your journey to mainstream success is complete, right?
No, the IMDb has as a star of the film. Wait, I missed that part. I forgot that part. It has a star of the film, Obama.
Right.
It lists Obama. So yeah, Barack Obama, Chuck Schumer, Jesse Jackson are listed as stars of the film on IMDb.
Right.
So I mean, it's clear that's what I'm saying. It's clear what they're saying are the politics of the film, and what they want us to understand is the appropriate direction here. As they remind us, like, this is the star, and this is your writer, and then this is your superhero. I mean, it's just that, the only other thing and to that point, the only other thing I have left in my notes is that they also slickly make sure that we hear Al Sharpton explaining on a phone call, probably to Chuck Schumer or somebody else, that Robert Smith, the black billionaire, is going to pay for the funeral pay for somebody's funeral.
So I didn't catch that.
Yeah, it's a slick little, he's walking through the airport or something like that, and I heard it, and you hear him saying, "Oh yeah, Robert Smith is going to take care of that. He said for us to go ahead and lay out the cost from the, so use the credit card, lay out the cost. He's going to reimburse us." And I was like, okay, so you want us to be sure to hear. So again, we're getting, these are the activists this is the version of activism, the Obama thing, the black billionaire thing, MSNBC, this is the direction, the trajectory of black struggle.
And if I could just say a couple of quick things.
That's it.
When Stephanie Rule says, "My dear friend Al Sharpton," I start laughing, because I know Stephanie Rule's accent, right? And I know that 20, 30 years ago, unless her family was just very liberal or very leftist or whatever, that that probably wasn't always her view, right? But my dear friend,
please.
The other thing I want to say is, okay, if you want to talk about the semiotics, maybe,
but
or
he's everybody on MSNBC's dear friend, because he gives them that black authenticity.
Right.
Anyway, sorry, go ahead.
But no, you're right. Please continue to jump in, because see, the other thing I wanted to say was that if we want to talk about the audio semiotics, if that makes any sense, right? You're saying about the Robert Smith call. That's not the call I paid attention to. The call I paid attention to was when he said hello, and you heard mumble, 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 mumble. And Sharpton said, "Yeah, man, I'll get right back to you." And then he turns to the camera and goes, "That was Jesse." As in old, sick, irrelevant. I'm the man now. I do the Saturday rallies. Jesse doesn't even do the Saturday rallies anymore. He's too ill for that. He's been doing that Saturday rally literally since I've been born. He's been doing that Saturday rally. Now the Saturday rally is a kind of a combination infomercial and black public affairs show that airs on YouTube on Saturday morning. It's Sharpton that now does the rally. And by the way, if this film, if they had just waited another 6 months, you know how this film would have ended? Just 2 weeks ago, Sharpton came out of a meeting last Thursday night, literally 14, 15 days ago, with every major black elected official in New York, including Mayor Swagger, Eric Adams. And this was a goal of his. He said, my goal was we need to have a black leadership summit. And he got every black major elected official in the state to meet at his National Action Network headquarters. And he came out and all of them were with him. And they all got up to the mic and talked about how great Al Sharpton was, and we're going to meet together and we're going to talk about common concerns. And his whole point was, I'm in charge. Do y'all get this? I'm in charge. Because remember, the minority leader, Hakeem, who said, remember, I'm not bending a knee to the hard left. Remember he said that? Okay.
Yep.
Okay. The minority leader of the House, who's going to be the Speaker of the House when the Democrats control the House, and the mayor of New York, Mayor Swagger, right, Eric Adams, were both members of NAN 20 years ago. So he gets to claim everybody. He gets to claim all of the current young leadership. Okay.
Yeah,
so,
I mean, you see Reverend Jamal Bryant in the background in some of these shots. I don't remember seeing Tamika and all of them though.
Right.
But they're clearly, you see Ben Chavis was in there.
Right.
What's his name? What's his name from the Urban League? What's his name?
Mark Morial.
Mark Morial.
Yeah, everybody's there. No, yeah, everybody's there. You're right. Everybody's
in
there.
the background is my point.
In the background, right?
In the background. To your point, like this is the man. This is the man right now. Like, yeah. Anyway.
Now let me just say one other thing. Now, I want to say I'm biased because I've covered this group for almost 40 years now. There is a way to do this legitimately. There's a group
you
in
see
New
Ben
Jersey.
Crump. I'm sorry, Ben Crump. I forgot Ben Crump.
Yeah, Ben Crump. Oh, absolutely. There is a way to do what Sharpton does legitimately. There's a group in New Jersey called the People's Organization for Progress, led by this brother Lawrence Ham. His autobiography is coming out in the next couple of months, written by a friend of mine. You can go to Dr. Ball's site, I Mix What I Like, and type in Earl Faison, and you can see how the People's Organization for Progress dealt with one of these shootings, and how the people the white cops went to jail and all of that. And I want to shout them out because they're so grassroots. They don't have a headquarters, right? They too also know how to manipulate media, but they don't have any swagger. They have presence. So when they call the media respects them because they've been out in the grassroots and they represent families who have gone through police brutality, but they do all of this legitimately. And I'm not saying Lawrence Ham is perfect and that he doesn't have people who don't like him. I'm not saying that, or the People's Organization for Progress. But I just want to say that there is a way to do this legitimately. So what Sharpton is doing,
but Lawrence Ham is not in the documentary, so he's there.
Oh no.
And by the way, Lucretia, 19 Keys wasn't there. They missed out.
The Coach's top thought leader.
Right.
He wasn't there, but Ben Crump does speak. They have him on camera speaking, so he's the heir. You see Jamal Bryant and all the heirs, but no Tamika. I didn't see Tamika Mallory. But I think that just in general, they are wanting us to see this is the lane. This is the lane that he has provided for us and for you who want to follow in his footsteps.
Right.
So anyway, man, what else? That was all I had.
That's it for my list of notes.
Okay.
Do you have any other comments about this?
I don't have any. I think there was one question here. Can you guys bring the archives back from Like It Is? Does the Schomburg have it? I don't know. Yeah, that's no.
Dr. Ball knows that that's not the question you asked me. I'll just say that one day we'll all be free. That's all I'll say. Because I can't go into it. It's too painful.
Thanks, Kenyatta. It all goes to the same place. Everybody get it all. We all it all. So thank you. You know.
Thank you, Kenyatta. Thank you.
The short answer, to help Dr. Burroughs is ease his pain. The short answer is no, and it's very difficult. And even during I remember doing my thesis research, trying to get a transcript from when he interviewed Dr. Clark, was damn near impossible. If I remember correctly, CBS still owns. Like he didn't own it, or he wasn't in control of this, or there's
a legal dispute. There's a legal dispute over what or WABC TV, the ABC affiliate, the flagship ABC. There's a dispute over who owns Like It Is, and this has been a legal battle for 20, 30 years. But there was a time not only could you get transcripts of Like It Is, because the same company that did transcripts for Nightline did transcripts of Like It Is.
Right.
But there was a point, in fact, Dr. Ball, you may remember this, you would come early into the office at Morgan State at very early in the morning, and I'd be sitting at the computer watching Like It Is from Maryland, because WABC was putting their local shows online, and they would put episodes of Like It Is online. So it's not like they don't have it, they do. But again, it's so painful for me, it's like I can't talk about it.
And no, they didn't. None of this was discussed either. There was none of this discussed about Nan and the tobacco industry. There was nothing. There was. I mean, they don't talk about. It's not like It's not like you watch this, and even from a positive perspective, you get a breakdown of how the National Action Network works. You don't get anything about the history. There's no like. It's a very, again, this is a very well done, carefully manicured, positive portrayal of someone that clearly we are intended to see as not only the heir to legitimate leadership, but the one who has produced the blueprint going forward. And it's a travesty in this in terms of so again, let's just wrap where you started. I mean, this is why I agree with your point that this documentary is positioning Sharpton to be the equivalent for us analytically as a neo-colonial imposed puppet dictator on a nominally liberated nation.
And by the way, to be complex, it's not that I dislike Sharpton or think he's, whatever. It's that he's complex. And when you have such a simplistic portrayal, that's what just threw me off. I mean, I was as angry as you were about Wakanda Forever. I was like, no, we can't. This can't stand. This can't stand. Right. So because audience, I want you to know, I literally texted Dr. Ball at 6 a.m. begging him to be on the show today. Because I was just like, this cannot be broadcast and screened for a day without this kind of analysis. Absolutely not.
Amazon Prime, and I think it's worse than this. It's not that he's the new John Lewis, because John Lewis was seen as again just the heir to Dr. King. Now that was false and fraudulent and et cetera and so forth, but this to me is the additional step of saying, not only am I the heir and the current king of Black activism, but this is the only way for you to do it. Like if you want to be a celebrity, if you want to move the needle, if you want to make a real impact, because ultimately I look at it as him saying King and Malcolm didn't do it. Like they didn't.
I followed up and made a real impact by being the irritant they were. That's what he's really saying. That's
at a bigger level, because he was saying they were just smart. He even says something along the lines of, it's one thing to give an analysis. I can't remember exactly how he says it, but he says something like this: one thing to give an analysis and to speak on an issue. It's another thing to move the people, or something like that. I mean, he was really. It's a problem. So
it's a problem
anyway. Dr. Burroughs, anytime you're disinterested in getting on, you always welcome. I'm always trying to drag you back onto the platform. When Angela
Bassett wins this Oscar for Wakanda Forever, her first Oscar. Oh, you don't know she's on track.
No, God, please.
She just won a Golden Globe, and the forecasters are saying if she wins the SAG award, she's a shoo-in.
It's wrong, bro.
She's a shoo-in for Best Supporting Actress, right? So look, as a comic book geek, I had a different viewing than you did, but I'm going to watch it again. I'm going to watch it from your eyes because I want to let you know. Unfortunately, I lost my uncle recently, but when we were at
sorry,
my uncle, who was named after Frederick Douglass, by the way, I only learned that a few years ago. Frederick Douglass Burroughs Jr. When we were at the repass, my cousin says to me, "Man, we got to talk about Wakanda Forever because there's so many people out here complaining about, this black, brown fighting and all that." I said, "You are not alone." I said, trust me, you are not alone. So Dr. Ball, you are not alone in this analysis. I'm letting you know. You gave the most intellectual version of it, but you are not alone. So I've got to go watch this film from my eyes and not from political eyes and not comic book eyes. But if Angela Bassett, who by the way made a beautiful speech at the Golden Globes, and this is the first, by the way, this is the first Marvel product to win this kind of award. So if she wins the SAG Awards that's coming up, she's a shoo-in for the Oscar, and that means that Marvel will get their first Oscar, and Angela Bassett will get her first Oscar. The Oscar she really deserved for Tina Turner, What's Love Got to Do with It? She's going to get it for this. And when that happens, I'm going to come back and we're going to talk, Wakanda Forever. I just want to let you know that. So thank you.
I begrudgingly look forward to it. Look, thanks again to you, Dr. Burroughs. Drumsinthe.globalvillage.com for all your work. The link is in the show description. Thanks to everybody who showed up today live and to those who will see this here later. To you, we say thank you and peace if you're willing to fight for it. Like Fred Hampton used to say, we will catch you next time on the platform and here at I Mix What I Like. So make sure you got the bell, click, make sure you have... And I'll catch you next time. Take care, everybody. Peace.
I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like. Everybody